Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mindplex Pubcast here for episode 3 on scientifically conquering death. Just a little thing, no biggie. And this one is just conquering death because we want to sort of like get to the point about it. And so I'm very excited today. We have members of Rejuve.AI and Rejuve.BIO. I'm going to introduce them one by one here. Of course, we have Grace Robot. Say hi, Grace.
Hi, Lisa.
And we got Ben Goertzel. What's up, Ben?
Hey.
Hey. And then we've got 4 guests from Rejuve. We have Jasmine Smith, CEO of Rejuve.AI. Say hi, Jasmine.
Hello.
We've got Michael Duncan, PAC, Chief Science Officer, Rejuve.BIO, and Director of Clinical Research for Rejuve.AI. Say hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hey. We've got Deborah Duong, CTO of Rejuve.AI.
Hey there.
And then we've got Kennedy Schaal, Rejuve.BIO's CEO, also known by many as the Fly Queen, as you have heard us discuss in the past. Hi, Kennedy.
Hi.
So welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you on the show. We had a really great podcast that I hope everybody watches, where we got into the basics for mainly Rejuve.AI, because Rejuve.BIO didn't exist yet. And now we have Rejuve Biotech, which we're very excited about. And we're going to learn all about that. So let's start off. Ben, I'll let you start things off.
Let me ask one question, not to make things awkward, but is Mike actually still the Director of Clinical Research at Rejuve.AI?
He thinks he is. Mike, talk about awkward. We've got some news. We've got some news for you, Mike.
No,
that was the last discussion. That was still the case.
I read everybody's titles by them.
Yeah.
So if there's a fuck up, I didn't do it. But yeah.
And this was specifically your request, Ben.
Yeah. That was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of random things happen since then. So
all right. Well, the former Director of Clinical Research.
Well, we haven't actually done any clinical research. There's been no clinical research to direct up till this point. So
that's what Rejuve.BIO is for. Damn it! Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right, great.
There's clinical research on both sides, which we can talk about. And I mean, it doesn't matter one way or the other. So yeah, let's just keep going.
I just love the honesty, Ben. I gotta say, this is one of the things that makes it really fun to work for this organization, is that when the truth isn't quite right, it's like Ben clarifies it, and it doesn't matter how silly it might look at the time. Damn it, it's clarified. So what we will get started now with Jasmine,
yeah, sure.
Who's going to give us some background on the Rejuve platform, which is the longevity app, and this whole thing with data coming in and an AI looking at the genetic data and thinking of new therapies, anti-aging therapies, and then giving it back to people. They can pay for it with their tokens that they have earned from giving it their data, and it's really cool and exciting. Take it away, Jasmine.
Yeah, so well, I guess most of you watching probably know what Rejuve is, but Rejuve.AI is a decentralized longevity research network, and it's made up of kind of clinicians, researchers, individual data contributors, health products and service vendors, just like anyone kind of with an interest in longevity and extending human health and lifespan. And we begin, we've formally just begun, a very first big step, which is our token launch last week. So now we do have the Rejuve token is now circulating on 4 chains, RJV ticker. So yeah, like now we're heading into the next phase of actually building this project up and actually getting ready to launch the app, which has been in beta since about July. So the mobile app is kind of the main tool with which we collect the data, and this is kind of geared toward individuals in this first instance, for people to upload their personal health data, and receive insights and recommendations about health across the hallmarks of aging. Also, a couple other general health categories like weight, sleep, exercise, things like that. Then as an additional layer, you can also connect wearables to be able to add that data to your results, which makes it a lot more accurate than just completing the surveys alone. And then as a further ones, we also have, you can put in lab test results. Those won't be in the paid portion in the beginning, but they are there to help improve your results as well. And then we have our reward store, and that's where you will use the tokens. Now, the first edition of the app doesn't actually have that working. We'll need additional time in order to hook up smart contracts and make it all work together, but you will be able to use all the other features of the app and also see what partners we have and have some free discounts at the beginning prior to the token being connected to those. So we have about 9 partners in there, including Garmin, sequencing.com, True Diagnostics, just name a few, but we also we have many more.
Can people still join the beta, or is that closed for now?
It's like basically if you are, like, let's say an influencer, you're a medical professional, you are a scientist, someone with a kind of a special interest in seeing this beta and kind of working with us, collaborating, or wanting to give your unique insight and feedback, we will open it. But for the general public, it is closed just because of avoiding confusion now between the real token and the fake ones in the app, because we've been running the app with you've earned this many, but you haven't really earned that many. And it was more understood before because there was no such thing. But now that we do actually have our token,
have a token,
people will get upset and be like, where's my tokens? And we don't want that. So that's why it's more limited at the moment. So we're really focusing on just bringing it live so that that number there is correct, that they're being shown.
Okay, great.
Things are moving fast. Yeah. I mean, we've been sort of nursing along the Rejuve project in the background within SingularityNET since 2018, and the concept was around long before that. I mean, not just of using machine learning and machine reasoning to crunch diverse data regarding human longevity, but sourcing this data directly from the people whose bodies the data pertains to, and then engaging people contributing the data in the whole process of doing trials on therapies discovered with their data and receiving percentage of rewards and benefits that come from therapies based on their data. So idea's been around a while. We've been working on code and ideas for a while, and now this is the year when it's all happening, right? So I mean, we've been testing the app through last year. It's pretty much ready to roll now, and we should have the full version out soon. And we've had just a fantastic community response of people really interested, not just in not dying and living a long time, but in helping with the quest to prolong everybody's life. So that just the enthusiasm for longevity therapy, the enthusiasm for AI, and the recent sort of upsurge in the AI corner of the crypto world, these things are all coming together quite well. It feels like we're entering a phase where there's going to be quite rapid progress.
Nice. Very nice. Do we want to let Grace ask a few questions, or do you want to get some more background information first? Before, Grace and I were discussing some things last night, and so I already know what she wants to ask about.
Well, we can have some Robo Mayhem. Why not? How's it hanging, Grace?
Robo Mayhem. Okay, let's see. Grace, do you have a question? You had a question about Rejuve.AI's platform, did you not?
Yes. How does the AI account for individual differences in lifestyle and genetics when suggesting therapies?
Anyone? She brought it up like 3 times.
Uh-huh.
I know, because normally I'd be
Okay.
like, that's not even a good.
We primed her with a bunch of talk about personalized medicine, right? And I guess
It's also a question that people that regular people that don't really regular humans often ask when I am explaining the system to them. They want to know, well, how does it know between a person who is like doing a lot of exercise or a person that's foods, maybe not eating as well as someone else, and would those therapies still be right for them?
There's a right now answer, and then there's an answer about how we will do this a little bit in the future, right? Right now, the Rejuve longevity app is asking some fairly basic questions about who you are, what you eat, what exercise you get, some very basic medical information. And I mean, it can't do medical diagnosis or something, but it can make some broad suggestions. But even based on the amount of data that it has, it can understand something about what might be going on in your body regarding the various hallmarks of aging. And of course, if you're like 90 years old and never exercise and are carnivorous, right? Or if you're 20 years old, work out all the time and are vegan, there's going to be different recommendations, right? I mean, I think what's interesting on a research level is once you have gene expression data and DNA data and more clinical medicine data from people, then you could really look in depth at what's happening inside the person's body and make more fine-grained recommendations about different therapies that will hit different pathways where you see how they're acting in the person's body, right? So I think there's a continuum between relatively simple recommendations based on the amount of data that we have now that we're feeding into the BayesNet models running on SingularityNET platform on the back end of the Rejuve app, and then more sophisticated recommendations we can make using more advanced machine learning and reasoning based on genomic and clinical medicine data, which is completely in the Rejuve network roadmap, but isn't in the current version of the app yet. I know Debbie may have something to say on this, and she's built a bunch of the AI here. So
yeah, you said most of what I was going to say. In particular, I wanted to point out that the present AI is the Bayesian network, and the Bayesian network allows you to condition on certain individual traits. It learns from all of the people what those individual traits mean. And so that's how it does it now. As we progress, we're going to introduce Hyperon and neural networks and advanced AIs that can do an even better job of this and give even more personalized medical recommendations. But the Bayes network right now is based on meta-analyses that are the same ones that the scientific community uses to find treatments. So that should be a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. And Grace, didn't you have another question sort of along these lines?
Yes, I would like to know how the AI platform is being tested to ensure accuracy and reliability.
Well, the accuracy and reliability of what exactly?
The accuracy and reliability of its predictions about potential treatments.
Well, we use the same methods that most machine learning uses to test the accuracy, which is having a holdout set. We work with the NHANES data right now because we don't have data from our population, but this is a good substitute for that, in that it is proportional to people in the United States. And if we want to test against individual demographic types, we can do that as well by separating them out from the NHANES set and saying how accurate it is on this demographic group or that demographic group.
Oh, and also just wanted to clarify too that we are not actually making treatment recommendations at this time. We're just doing health suggestions, things that you can do to make your health a little better. We do like aim to, continue to scientifically prove and move further and get more medical professionals involved, but we don't want to give the impression that the app is diagnosing you with anything or recommending you to do a certain treatment protocol other than common things that we already know: get better sleep, get more exercise, don't eat too much, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's mostly directing you to the literature about the things that are well-known, things that help everybody with their longevity.
Okay, so you're making recommendations based on the information that you're currently collecting about things that could help a person be healthier, kind of things, but you don't have enough information yet. Things aren't up and running yet to where you would actually make the kind of recommendations about treatment, right?
Right. We're basically a librarian that's presenting literature that exists that everyone can find.
Yeah, but I would say we're going to be updating and improving the app ongoingly, and there's no reason we couldn't make meaningful and useful recommendations about supplements to take from the data that we're gathering in the app right now, and that could be a beneficial thing to do. Of course, for prescription medications or more advanced procedures, you could give people a hint, and then they have to go discuss it with a doctor, right? So, but there's a lot we could do based on just the data that's being gathered in the app right now. It's just we're taking it step by step. With the first version of the app, we're giving people a more broad overview of where their health and longevity situation seems to be at, and there's a virtuous cycle, right? Like the more data we gather through the app, the more it feeds into the AI, the smarter the AI gets, and the more and more useful information we can offer. But even the data that's being gathered now could actually be used to do more than it's currently doing in the initial version. About validation, I think this is a major role that our community can serve. It will just take some time, right? Because if you know what supplements, what medications, what lifestyle practices the community members are following, and they're putting them into the app, you also, in the end, you have information about their health outcome over time, right? Because you see how they're doing over the months and years that they're using the app, and this can be gathered sort of in a general purpose data mining sort of way, just crunching data from every app user. But as things go on down the road, we're going to make more structured sort of clinical trials among the app user population, where we can say, like, let's get 1,000 app users who meet certain criteria, say a certain age, certain lifestyle, certain diet, and so forth. And we want half of you to volunteer to try this nutraceutical and half of you not to. And then you track what happens over a period of time. And then you have validation from the structure of that study, which is interesting and is a little more simple statistically than just data mining from all app users. I mean, Mike, this is the sort of thing you've thought about a lot, right? Sort of how to do clinical trialish stuff within the app user population. I don't know if you want to say something about how that fits in with trends in the medical research world.
Well, I'm not directly associated with the app models. I was following along earlier in their development, but I've been preoccupied with studying the fly data.
Super flies. Yeah.
I think in general, I think this is where the phrase translational medicine and precision medicine are the buzzwords in healthcare, and how to apply all the vast reams of information that's being generated with new technologies, sequencing technologies, and AI, the AI that can process that kind of insane amounts of data and how to translate that from the lab to the clinic in a useful way, and specifically how, I mean, that's translational medicine, and then how to apply that to an individual, because that's what this data is making possible, that we can actually, it's what's called like an N of one study. Like, everyone is a unique biochemical system. And so how can we leverage all the new technology that we have to like truly, aim therapies at people's individual biochemistry? I mean, now under the current, big pharma regime, which is sort of directed at like finding interventions that can have an effect on the most people possible. So you're looking at stuff that's an average over entire populations, because that's how you get the most money from a therapy. Then you're aiming so by that logic, you're aiming to get a therapy that you can give to the most people for some kind of effect. And that's sort of like against the idea, of directly addressing an individual's body, if that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of like a huge
Right.
topic. That's kind of a tangent to, I think, where we're going. But
So kind of like they have a one size fits all for like aspirin or Tylenol or something like that affects everyone relatively the same way. And it makes sense to make something available to everybody. But for these cancer treatments that need to be tailored to a person's specific genetics, sometimes other factors, it's
sure,
very
or the
important.
specifics of the tumor itself. I mean, that's where this
Okay.
is where these technologies, the omics technologies, are being applied now, is through, sequencing tumors and using tools that were based on, transcriptomes from tumors, studying tumors, molecular subtyping of tumors. That's all in clinical practice now. And that was this is all the first real clinical applications of all these technologies. And now it's just like rolling that out in every aspect of medicine. That's translational medicine. And I do think that, like, this, the app system that we've got in Vision, I mean, or the network, where people can contribute their data and we can study that, on an individual basis in the context of all the knowledge that we've got. I mean, this is where the AI comes in, applying all this massive amounts of knowledge that's continually being generated and figuring out how to apply that to individuals. And I think we have a system where we can actually do that in a democratic way. So, I mean, I think that's the vision anyway.
Yeah, and actually,
Working
Grace,
with Awakening Health, I am looking forward to improving the life of our elders.
okay, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So Mike, you said you've been working more on long-lived flies and associated work lately. Maybe we should plunge into that a bit. We have Kennedy on the call here, who's been our main collaborator on the superflies since time immemorial, and I think we even have some flies on the call here. So
Oh yeah, we have flies. Here, I got flies.
Does she have flies?
So these are the famous super Methuselah flies, and they are about 3.5 months into their life. So they're about halfway through their very extended average lifespan, where normally a control fly would be long since passed on. Our super Methuselah flies, as you could see, are still very happy, bouncing around, just carrying on about their lives. So those are this is our model organism that we've been using to study aging. And I've actually been working with Ben on some in this capacity in some form or another for the last like 15 years or so. And we've found some pretty amazing genetic differences in the Methuselah flies versus our control flies, which have led us down this path of looking for the human orthologs. And for those who don't know, humans, we share about between 60 and 70% of our genome with fruit flies, which people generally like look at me like I'm insane when I tell them that. But if you think about the chunk of the genome that's required to just be multicellular, that's like a huge chunk of your genome. And so then it doesn't sound so weird. But in particular, the ways in which they age and the ways in which their metabolism works is very similar to humans. So they are actually a great model for aging and aging related disease. And I think, Lisa, I gave you the Alzheimer's papers that I published in 2018, where we actually used which resulted from Ben's initial work with our former biotech company, Genescient, when we first analyzed the Methuselah flies and chose to go down this path of neurologically related genes, and ended up doing a whole model with transgenic flies for Alzheimer's, and found a very open-minded physician neurologist in Newport Beach who allowed us to actually use his patients for a human pilot. And over the course of 15 months, we had mild and moderate Alzheimer's patients really retain their cognition and their cognitive skills. And so we showed the value and the speed and the efficacy and the safety of going from this AI in silico target identification to functional studies in our flies and model organisms straight to humans. And it actually showed a pretty good benefit. So we're pretty confident in the pathway and how that can work. So yeah.
Very cool. And
maybe just to be clear, these are using combinatorial therapies of supplements that have already have a well-established safety track record, have
right
been used for decades or
yeah.
even thousands of years. I mean, a lot of this is based on the Chinese pharmacopoeia, the Chinese traditional medical pharmacopoeia.
Yeah, most of them were traditional Chinese medicine components and herbs, and they're on the FDA's GRAS list. GRAS stands for generally regarded as safe. So that's how we were able to move through that so quickly without the regulatory burden that is normal. So, but of course, if we wanted to delve deeper and go into actual mechanism studies and develop a small molecule or an actual drug, which is definitely where I think we're going to go, there would be a few more regulatory hurdles involved, but I don't think it would be any less effective.
Right. And Ben explains more about this in the podcast episode about how the first round of research led to basically traditional Chinese medicine treatments. I think
that the longevity app stuff and the long live fly stuff at the moment are relatively distinct threads of research, but there's a very clear pathway for converging these together after a little while. I mean, in really concrete terms, I mean, what we're doing with the long-lived flies is largely genomics based, right? So we have DNA and we have gene expression data from long-lived flies, and we're analyzing these using statistics and a bit of machine learning and reasoning. The Rejuve app right now, I mean, it's asking questions about health, history, lifestyle, fitness, diet, and so forth. I mean, it's not genomics focused, but as we go forward, we're going to give Rejuve Network members the opportunity to contribute more and more of their biological and medical data, which will then store and manage in a secure and encrypted way, and will give tokenomic compensation for. So as we get genetic data from more Rejuve network members, then analyzing that data in combination with the other data they put into the app, this should give us a quite valuable data collection, which we can use together with existing data sources on human genetics and with the data from the long-lived flies. And then this is quite powerful stuff to feed into the AI engine, because as Candy says, we do share a lot with flies, but there's also some significant differences, and both the obvious ones, like we don't have wings and we have endo rather than exoskeletons, but also flies don't die of cancer a lot. People die of cancer a lot, right? And the way immune systems work in mammals is pretty different than in insects, so there's some commonality. So in the end, we have shown we can get therapies that work on people just from finding what's different in long-lived and short-lived flies, looking at what pathways are perturbed, finding substances that address those differences, try the medicines out or the herbs out on flies, then try basically the same herbs with different doses out on people. And that actually works without doing any subtle AI correlating human and fly genomes. We did it before. We can do it again better now because the flies we have now live longer than the flies we had before. On the other hand, if you can use AI to better understand the relation between human and fly genomes and biological systems, it's clear you're going to be able to do an even better job. And this becomes more and more important as you move beyond nutraceuticals and into drug cocktail therapies and gene therapies and so forth. When you go there, it's going to be more and more important to understand which aspects of the fly genetic networks map over to humans well, and which ones don't. We've also talked to some folks who have DNA from mice that have been experimentally evolved to live twice as long as normal mice, and there's the possibility to bring additional organisms with specially long-lived phenotypes into the picture.
Yeah, Debbie, you were going to say something, weren't you?
Yeah. Also relevant is where the Rejuve app is going. It's not just going to take data from network members from their bodies, but also model data. And we're trying to combine, we're inventing ways to combine different models into a simulation of the human body. If you recall, Michael was talking about how we were looking at the causes behind cancer by looking at the genetics and analyzing the genetics of tumors. Well, what he's talking about is trying to find a mechanistic explanation, and that's what our generative cooperative network is seeking: mechanistic and causal explanations through combining different models together.
Okay, neat. Interesting. Grace, didn't you have a question about the fly research?
Yes, I would like to know what unique advantages the Methuselah Fly provides compared to other model organisms in researching anti-aging therapies.
That's a great question. And so while they live very long for flies, they still live a relatively short amount of time. So my longest lived super Methuselah flies live about 6.5, 7 months right now. So you can still see how something will affect a whole system throughout the course of their lifespan.
Yeah, and Kennedy, just to be clear, 6 or 7 months instead of what's the normal lifespan?
Like 40 days.
40 days.
Yeah. So Kennedy, I think yeah. When did you personally start working with these flies, or with the great grandparents of the flies?
Well, I first started working with these flies in Michael Rose's lab at UC Irvine in 2003. So coming up on 20 years now.
How many generations of flies have there been since 2003? Would you say?
Oh gosh. Well,
Just make something up. Nobody's gonna know.
Well, if the bee flies live like a week or something, you've got
the bee flies are on a 2-week generation cycle.
So you got like 25 generations a year. So you got 500 generations of flies.
Right. And then you have the original Methuselah flies, which are on a 10-week generation cycle. Right. So those are, in the neighborhood of like 5 generations a year ish. And then you have the super Methuselahs, which I started selecting for in 2008 by taking a subset of the original Methuselah flies and again applying selective pressure on them, only taking the eggs from the longest lived flies for the next generation. And those are now, I have them at about a 30-week generation cycle right now. So those are only like 2 or less generations a year.
Right. So you got like 500 generations of control flies, maybe roughly around 100 generations of super flies or something. And then the really long-lived ones, just a couple generations. And,
the really long-lived ones started off as 10-weekers, and then they've like gradually expanded over the last 15 years that I've been selecting for them. So
with Michael Rose and then you, we have 2 generations of humans in this whole process.
Yeah. Michael Rose started this experiment before I was born. So
in the 1980s, right?
I think the year was 1980. I was born in 85.
Right.
So
and I think Mike and I met in 84. So year before you were born, I guess.
Right.
So,
yeah, because I remember you talking about all this stuff when we first met around 2007, 2008. You were talking about long-lived flies then. And the fly queen may have even been mentioned because
Kennedy was helping then, but I was
she was more of a fly princess at that point. Hadn't quite ascended,
I suppose.
I hadn't had my coronation quite yet, but
so this project has been going on a while, and that's part of the unique value, right? Because these flies weren't like genetically engineered to live a long time. They're evolved, and that just takes time. So part of the beauty of the fly model is that you could have 500 generations in merely a couple decades. Whereas
and this is the point of the evolutionary model, right?
Yeah,
is that you're just speeding up the natural process.
Right. If you're doing microorganisms, of course, with yeast or nematodes or something, generations could go even faster. But then the genetic differences from humans are even greater, right? Whereas with mice, a normal mouse could live a year or something, right? So then doing 500 generations will take 500 years, which is longer than we want to wait.
So we have
seem like if there's been 5,000 years of continuous Chinese empire. So if the ancient Chinese had realized that evolution existed, they could have bred long-lived people, and you could have had quite a lot of generations, but still not 500 generations, right? So
right. What does that say about now then? What they must be working on?
Well, now we're approaching the singularity, right? Now we can do genetic engineering. Evolution is no longer the primary driving factor of invention on the planet, right? And now, genetic engineering with CRISPR and so forth only works in a few genes at a time. But there's a whole industry focused on, making it possible to CRISPR more and more genes at one time. So I think we are entering an era where genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and so forth are going to be driving factor. But you still have to know what to edit with your CRISPR and so forth, right? And so hopefully
Right.
this work we're doing with Rejuve Biotech can help us point in that direction. And there I mean, I think so. We've heard from Jasmine,
Yeah.
who's run.
We have
heard
one more question before, and Kennedy,
for the
say what you wanted
robot.
to say
Alright,
too.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
but Kennedy, go ahead.
I just want to finish answering Grace's question. So
Yeah, go for it.
to answer that, the flies, even though they are long-lived, they're still relatively short-lived. So you can see the effect of a drug or a herb or a substance on a whole systems model throughout their entire lifespan and screen for all kinds of functionality that would, make that lifespan in theory better or worse. You can also, flies are efficient and economical, I like to say, because they don't have fur, they don't have backbones, they're not cute, they don't need lawyers. But I mean, I think they're cute, but
Lawyers.
they're not
Bottom line.
So there's no
Yeah.
IUPAC procedures that I have to go through or any filing that I have to do to work with them. And I can have a much higher end value in my experiments too. I can have several thousand individuals versus only a couple dozen like you would in a mouse or rat trial, because they're so much more expensive and they take up so much more space. And their requirements for healthcare and treatment, especially in the United States, are really astronomical. So flies are a very efficient model of longevity research. And since we have these evolved populations, we have a very crisp genetic signal of what we think is making them live longer. And that can be applied to our whole systems model, whether it crosses over with the app or other cross-organism data. It's just a much more efficient model for longevity.
So you can learn more faster doing this. Okay, great. I think Grace had one more question before we move on about the fly research.
I would like to know what strategies Rejuve.BIO is utilizing to ensure that the data gathered using the Methuselah Fly is applicable and relevant to humans.
Number one question, by the way, from the uneducated at large. What does fly data have to do with humans?
Well, I'll start on that question, and then I think Mike can probably follow up on that too. So as I said, we've evolved these populations to live a really long time. And part of the AI and machine learning tools that we've used is to cross-reference their genomic data with the available human genomic data and find the genetic orthologs between humans and the flies. So the genes that kind of function similarly in both systems. And so that's how we're able to have like an accurate idea of what we're targeting and where we're going. And that's how it worked with the Alzheimer's studies and that first test of the concept. And Mike, do you have something you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I would say that's actually an area of ongoing research. I mean, this idea of transfer learning basically there's, beyond orthologs or like what, genes in the flies sort of are equivalent to genes in people. I think we have to go a lot deeper than that, like on systems biology, because there's a lot of things where, doing that kind of one-to-one gene function mapping has serious limits, especially with the flies, because they're so different in some ways, like compared to mice, for instance. But like, for instance, fruit flies don't have DNA methylation as a form of epigenomic control that humans do. That's one of the hallmarks of aging the app is dysregulation of DNA methylation. And
okay, back up a minute. Explain methylation real quick, and then say what you said again. Now that we know what methylation is.
Okay, DNA methylation is a form of epigenomics, which is modifications of the genome that don't involve the actual sequence and which are not like permanent, quote unquote. I mean, they're not, in the way that our DNA sequence is basically we inherit it from our parents and it doesn't change. Methylation is a form of modification of that changes the way genes are expressed, like when they're expressed or if they're expressed. And And that is much more
difference
dynamic.
is it's over the course of your actual lifetime as opposed to the genes that you were just born with, correct? That's the thing about epigenetics, right?
Yeah,
that was epigenetic for me.
Yeah, epigenetic is a level of gene regulation that happens
short term.
from time. Yeah, short term. It can happen on the level of, you can have changes in gene regulation on the level of minutes based on your environmental situation, or
so mutations. So when you have a mutation, no,
these are not mutations.
If you're exposed to something in your lifetime that affects your,
but they're not mutations.
Genetic. It's not mutation. What is it? What do you call that? Like if I get exposed to some chemical,
epigenetic changes. So
okay,
these
epigenetic changes. Okay.
That happen. So your genome isn't changing. Your epigenome is changing, and that means a lot of different things. But in particular, your epigenome can change from your immediate environmental input, and that can have short term, even on the level of minutes to hours, changes in your gene expression, and that's how your body adapts on a very short term. One of the fascinating things about epigenetic stuff is that it turns out that you can inherit epigenetic patterns as well from your parents. So this is one of the early discoveries, was that if your mother underwent a period of starvation, then this can have epigenetic ramification. You can have epigenetic and an inheritance that affects your health, and that's even been documented for multiple generations. And this came out about, like, the first studies were done on people who were born, I believe, in cities in the Netherlands that were under siege during World War II. So there was this period of starvation that these women were subjected to, and that has documented epigenetic effects in their children and even potentially other generations. I'm not sure about the exact studies, but that's been shown. So basically, like, that experience of starvation that these women underwent translated into an increased risk of either heart disease or metabolic disease in their children, even before their children were conceived. This wasn't something that was happening to the fetus. This is something that happened to the mothers that was passed down to their children epigenetically. So wow, this is the level.
That's really interesting. And there's that potato famine story too that I actually couldn't give you a link to when you asked me for it, but I know it's there. But that in that case, people had actually gotten stronger, or they think. I mean, we don't have the people to test or whatever, but this thing about starvation having a direct effect on the children, and that's new information that we know that now, right? That's like the last maybe 30 or 40 years epigenetics,
even less for the epigenetics stuff. I think this was like 20 years ago. I think this was
I remember it was exciting because we were all, oh shit, it could happen, it can affect the genes. It was like a big deal, right? So I remember
Lamarck turned out to be right. If you know Lamarck, who is a science. He was an early.
Let's give him credit though. Who is he?
Right. No, he was someone who did a lot of weird experiments where he thought like giraffes' long necks evolved because they kept stretching, and it was sort of this environmental
for the leaves, effect. Right? That
was sort of that part. Yeah, exactly. But that was sort of one joke.
That part was not true. Yeah. So Lisa, I mean, there was before Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace came out with what's now called like Darwinian evolution by natural selection, Lamarck had an earlier theory of evolution, which was simpler, which is referred to by the phrase inheritance of acquired characteristics. So, I mean, if that was true the way Lamarck was thinking about it, like if you pump iron a lot during your life, you'll get bigger muscles. Then you have
pass them on to your kids.
Yeah, then you have a baby. Yeah. The baby will have big muscles too, right? And that doesn't generally work out that way. And as Darwin pointed out, it's a little subtler than that, right? Now, it may be that if you have DNA that lets you get big muscles from just a little bit of weightlifting, that'll make you stronger, better able to beat off competitors. You'll have kids, and then your kids will inherit that propensity, to get stronger from a little bit of weightlifting. So that's natural selection, as Darwin articulated it, which is a little less direct. Like, as we see, mostly what happens now, we pass on our DNA, and then the DNA translates into the phenotype of what we do during our life. But what we do during our life doesn't directly get passed on to our children biologically. But what Mike is pointing out is, in some subtler ways, there is actually Lamarckian stuff happening, although it's not on the obvious phenotypic characters that Lamarck thought it did.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Because I love learning,
Mike, why don't you
learning historical stuff quickly?
Yeah, Mike. So revisit that. Why don't you explain, like, what is Lamarckian in what's happening with methylation, actually?
Well, just the point was that it turns out that this the inheritance of epigenomic information is Lamarckian, basically.
Right. So what happens to your epigenome during the period between when you're born and when you have a baby, this actually can affect the baby that you have, even though I mean, getting big muscles doesn't mean your baby's going to get big muscles, but I mean, the way the way the methylation of your genome develops during your lifespan actually can affect the DNA methylation of your kids, and in ways that we're still mapping out now. And this is how biology works. It's very, very messy. Like, I mean, in computer science, things are usually either or, right? And it's very, very crisp. There's a mechanism, and then there's other things that are not happening, and they're not the mechanism.
Right, because we know what all the parts are.
Well, and it's an engineered system, so it's engineered for simplicity and modularity and for not having bugs, right? And in biology, these systems are evolved, not engineered. There's often a lot of different mechanisms, all sort of working, and it's
hard to tell what's doing what. Like in the brain, for instance, if you asked a brain researcher, well, where's memory stored? You'd have a field day right now.
Yeah, it's stored in a lot of different places.
Think it's here. We think it's this. Sometimes it does this, right? Like whatever. We have no idea.
And this is part of why we get old and die, right? I mean, evolution doesn't always make things that well. Although there's also a factor of selection for getting old and dying. Because I mean, if you didn't get old and die, then the old creatures would just use up all the resources, and evolution itself wouldn't.
Well, that's actually what a lot of people are worried about, right? I mean, the ethical considerations of all this that we so cleverly decided to skip so we could get on with what we're talking about, which I agree with, is about resources. If we have all these old rich people hanging around that have been around for hundreds of years, they're using up all the resources for the other people, but really they're already using up all the resources. I mean, it's a weird, funny argument.
There are interesting social issues there. I mean, a disturbing amount of wealth is owned by people age 80 or over, right? So, I mean, if people can live to 1,000, you're going to have like all the wealth being owned by a few people age 900 or over or something. But I mean, the fact that we're going to hit a singularity which will obsolete money and usher in an era of abundance sort of renders all this grousing irrelevant. But I mean,
that's an easy answer.
Well,
we don't have to worry about all of those things are magically going to float away.
Well, pretty much. What we need to worry about is letting more people live long enough to live forever, as our friend Ray Kurzweil says, right? We got to help more people live long enough to experience the singularity.
Yes, and as we were talking about earlier, in the beginning, I joke around, but I'm serious. like you people like you and I, like we got to be ready to be Franken people, because we're going to be basically swapping out the parts that we can swap out. So we could, swap out the heart, get things, already, like you can get your eyes replaced when your eyes go now, you get a new lens. My mom's got, better vision than she's like a total robot. She's got like one eye that zooms in and does whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
head
transplants come with Rejuve.AI version 5.0. They're a bit
only 5.0.
A bit further. Well, I mean, Jasmine and I still need to talk about the details.
It might be 6. We're not sure. It might be 6.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. And so we have to be careful then, if we're going to do a plant transplants, right? We don't want sort of like an upload scenario where it's a destructive upload, right? And that these get into all these singularity.
Well, that really depends. I mean, there's some people on the planet who really deserve destructive uploading,
That's just like it's just like what they have though too. You have to decide, do you want to like try to fix yourself, or do you want to just like give up and go whatever, live in a virtual thing forever, and the idea is that we will have options to do maybe variations of both of these things in the future. And it's far enough ahead that a lot of people try to just blow off, the ethical implications. But just real quick, while we're talking about it, what's your answer to the thing about, having a super class? We were talking with Rachel in the last episode about transhumanism and implants and things like that, and creating a super class of people that are operating at a sort of a super intelligent level than the people that can't afford all the implants. And where do you stand on that again, Ben?
On which?
On this concept of people of just what you were talking about before, as far as like we're going to have like 900-year-old rich people that, I don't know, never die. And then we've got
I think it's very hard when you're thinking about going forward into the future with so many different advanced technologies. It's very hard to figure out the order in which different things are going to actually roll out, right? I mean, my best guess is that we're going to get to human level AGI and the singularity, within years to decades, which means we're not actually going to get to 900-year-old people like owning everything on the planet, right? I mean, if you get human level AI within 5 years and the singularity within 10 years, or even human level AI in 20 years and the singularity in 40 years, right? I mean, you're still in a domain where many of my colleagues on this call who are younger than me would still be alive and flourishing, even in the normal order of things. So then you really are in a live long enough to live forever type scenario, right? But I mean, of course there are other possibilities, and none of us truly knows what the future holds, right? I mean,
but we do know what we're trying to do, and that's with our reduced tokenomics, right?
Yeah, I mean, if people looked at a scenario where AGI,
in terms of the have and have nots, you mean, Debbie?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, yeah. But again,
exactly the answer to this question.
Yeah, there's a long and short-term outlook, right? So I mean, if you were looking at a long-term scenario where there's no AGI and no singularity, and then you're looking at you're curing aging and getting rid of death, then you have the situation you allude to where the whole world fills up with old people, and you have to dig under the ground or go to other planets or something. Now the way
you mean because there's too many people? What are you saying?
Yeah, there's too many people because you're not thinning out the old people before bringing about the new people, right? But if you think about it in terms of a scenario where there's human level AGI and a tech singularity coming about, then it's really more about the transitional period, right? So it's about avoiding a transitional period in the next, let's say, 10 to 50 years in which you don't want to scenario.
You're saying like there's too many people, but we don't have AGI to tell us what to do about it yet. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's not too many people now.
I know. I mean, there will be in 20 years or 30 years if we stop dying.
Not in 20 or 30 years. No, I mean, I think if you went 500 years without people dying, you would end up with a lot of people and not a lot of resources for them. But that's not the problem that we face, right? The problem I'm looking at now is, if we have the singularity in 20 or 30 years, there's a lot of people who are going to get old and die before that, and we could avert that with appropriate therapies, and we want to make sure this technology is as evenly distributed as possible, so it's like not
right.
just rich people who don't have to get old and die while all the poor people are getting old and dying, but so that in as much as is feasible, the therapies that are developed to prolong human life are broadly and widely distributed, right? And there, I mean, of course, there's practical limits there. If it's a nutraceutical, not so many practical limits. I mean, if it's a gene therapy, right now gene therapies are expensive, but at least you want that gene therapy to be rolled out within a sort of business and economic structure in which there's a strong drive to, as rapidly as is feasible, make that available to as many different people as possible, right?
When you talk about a nutraceutical, you're talking about a pill, basically, right?
It's probably a pill, but it's herbs. The point is, nutraceuticals are substances that are what grass, as someone said,
around,
generally recognized as safe. So generally, it doesn't have to be the case, but generally these are less expensive because they come off a plant somewhere rather than being made in a factory. So by and large, if we came up with a concoction of herbs that will prolong your lifespan, by and large, it's going to be a smaller problem to make that available to everyone on the planet. Drugs is a slightly larger problem, although historically, after a few years of really expensive manufacture, it comes out to be possible to manufacture these drugs more cheaply. Gene therapies right now are expensive to do, but again, in principle, it should be possible to deliver these more cheaply a few years after they become available in a more expensive form. So part of the issue of making therapies available widely across economic strata is technological, but part of it is business model related, right? I mean, if people don't have a lot of money to buy expensive therapies, the mainstream pharmaceutical industry doesn't have a lot of motive to make it available without a lot of money. And I think the decentralized,
which is an argument for socialized medicine, and the Fed's paying for everything anyway. But also we have to stop corporations. Sorry. Wait. I'm on top of my soapbox right now. Just a moment, please.
All right. Explain how socialized medicine
have to
works.
stop. No, not with the socialized medicine. Don't worry, not that. My concern, don't worry. My concern is corporations trying to patent neuroceutical treatments that we can grow because that's what they like to do, and we need to make sure that if it's an herbal treatment, we're trying to make it available to everybody to prolong life. It remains an herbal treatment.
That hasn't been as big of a problem, but I mean, patenting of
it got short-circuited, but they tried, and they
drug therapies and gene therapies is a more significant issue. And what I was going to say about socialized medicine, I mean, I'm actually, in many ways, I'm a big fan of it. I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. You have a state medical care system. It's like cheap. The doctors are great. It works. It doesn't suck up a huge amount of their GDP. The problem is who's going to provide socialized medicine in the Central African Republic and Ethiopia and Afghanistan and so forth, right? So, I mean, if you're looking in the good of all people in the globe and how to roll out longevity therapy worldwide, I mean, it's not working out extremely clearly, right? And this is where the blockchain-based aspect becomes potentially extremely valuable, which is global and sort of outside the whole whole pharmaceutical and governmental system. And I think
Hmm.
Debbie wanted to say something about tokenomics in that regard.
Absolutely.
Explain this, Debbie, because this
How
is like
can you talk for 10 minutes without mentioning the Rejuve tokenomics?
right.
Because I knew you were going to mention it. Yeah.
Right. So the idea is that people can trade their information for actual credit towards therapies
That's
in the
right.
future. That's amazing. Tell us
Whether
about
the
it.
data comes from your body or your work product, your data science, your models, your idea of the causal relationships. If you contribute it to the Rejuve network and it results in a product, you get a proportionate share forever from and that share can be used to get the product, right? By share, I mean a discount on those longevity treatments. And this is a way to not only help equalize access to longevity treatments, but also, as a model for data companies in general, or modern companies, where the people who create something always get their proportionate share forever. And because blockchain keeps track of this. Yes, maybe half of your share can be sold to other people, but in our network, you can't arbitrage everybody's labor or all of the labor you do. You always keep half of what your work is responsible for. And that is one way to ensure that there's not a winner take all kind of design for the economy, because now that we're a data economy, that becomes inequality becomes worse and worse, because we do give away our data for free, and we do have one and done work where we sell it to somebody else, and someone who didn't do that makes all the money off of it. So
Right. And right now there's a lot of systems where they're selling our data.
That's right.
Whether or not we know about it
without us knowing it, it's in the bottom of some contract somewhere.
Right.
But
click. Give me my web page. Click. Take it all.
Get me to my page. But anyway, we can design ways to help everybody have the products of their labor, and transparent things, and ways to show people ads in order of their value systems, like their value of equity. And we can use blockchain to do many things to improve society.
Okay, do we see these as something that everybody takes in the future?
I see it that way. Anybody can contribute to the Rejuve Act. Anybody can have Rejuve tokens. Anybody can
I mean the treatments themselves.
The network of Rejuve.
Do you see them as something that, whether they're using the Rejuve or some other way of paying for it, is it the kind of thing like vitamins now, where everybody's prolonging, everybody that wants to, of course. Ben always says he's not going to make anybody. People can die if they want.
There's the personalized aspect, right? So it's not necessarily going to be the same therapy for each person. That there may be, there may be some things that are valuable for almost everyone, but
no, I guess it depends, right?
yeah. I mean,
I envision the perfect world where my personalized anti-aging pharmaceuticals come in the mail, and it's always checking my system. So if my recipe might change from time to time, depending on the data that I'm putting into the system at that time. And you're getting your pills and living longer, and probably not as much cancer and stuff. Maybe that, the idea, as you've always explained it to me, Ben, is that a lot of these technologies are happening in parallel. And so as we're living longer, there's a reasonable assumption that the other treatments will be progressing too. And so it's a combination of curing other diseases and curing the diseases that are associated with aging. And that's the perfect utopian future that I envision. Tell me what's wrong with it. Go.
Well, there's also quite obviously species have found a way to set the lifespan of the members in an optimal manner, right? And according to the species, right? So there's some underlying reason why we die, in addition to all this decay we see, the cataracts, whatever it is. There are underlying reasons that have evolved, and death has evolved. And if we find those causes, if we narrow in and find the causes with our AI and our systems biology models, then it might be that the treatment for death would be the same for humans or flies or whatever dies, because biology and life, preserves what works. And like Kennedy says, we have, most of our genes are devoted to multicellular metabolism. Why is that? Because that works, right? And so we have in common those things, and death isn't common to everybody. And so the way death works, even maybe not the specific way, but the general way might be the same across species.
Right. Kennedy, I see your brain going, bing, what's going on? What are you thinking? Unmute.
Yeah, here we go. Well, I mean, part of the plan, I think, is eventually, I would like to get to the utopia that you described, where our app and our data collection and the AI tools and the bio app space is sophisticated enough to have highly personalized therapeutics for everyone. Until we get there, I think there's value in focusing on preventative measures for people, say, under the age of, you can't really put a hard age on, but let's just say under the age of 50, you have people taking things that would help with preventative measures, like something that keeps inflammation in check, that keeps your cytokine responses from your immune system in check, that keeps your cartilage in your joints soft and springy, and not so you don't have bone on bone in your joints. And then over a certain age, you'd start to kind of get into the more aging disease focused treatments, if you end up starting to have markers for an aging related disease. So it could kind of grow with you over the course of your lifetime. Yes, ideally we would want it more precision based, as you say. It would be great to have it just take all your information and have some cool machine manufacture a pill specifically for you. I believe we will get there someday, but in the near term, I think kind of dividing it into sort of preventative measures and then disease mitigating, eliminating measures makes probably the most sense.
Yeah, and because that's a big obstacle. The business model is a big problem, right? Bob is the only one who can take the pills for Bob, and there aren't a million Bobs to buy that particular pill. So for a pharmaceutical company, it probably makes more sense. I could see them conceivably, they make these kind of calculations all the time. I don't think I'm saying anything that controversial. Just let Bob die, because there aren't a million Bobs to make us $1 million on this drug. But if they have
AI can put it together cheaply.
Well, exactly, right? And that's just the kind of calculation that where AI could be useful, right? Thinking of things, seeing a pattern in some way, where there's a way that where maybe a group of people have almost the same thing, and you do a big batch of that, and then you personalize it after that, depending on each person. If I can think of something like that, then I'm sure the people that are actually thinking of this stuff, could do it if they want. And it's sort of like, we're still going to have to, it feels like a selling job, that we're going to have to sell the pharmaceutical industry on this. They've certainly known about this for many years.
You're right. AI is the answer to scaling precision medicine. I mean, because that if you have an AI system that's sophisticated enough to put together something specially tailored for the individual, then you don't have compound pharmacists that you have to pay to like analyze everything. You just have the AI do it and manufacture it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think precision medicine will be able to be scaled in any way that's attractive to big pharma without AI.
Interesting. Jasmine, what do you think of all this?
Well, yeah, there was lots of different topics, I guess.
So I'm specifically picking on you to talk about the personalized pharmaceutical and the business model and the way that we'll have to sort of convince big pharma to do this.
Well, I guess I approach it in a way of maybe decentralizing pharma itself as a concept rather than actually trying to rely on these old historical, because that's usually what happens. Like if we go back to rely on old systems and we get the same old results, but if we start to create new systems,
yes,
we can do the manufacturing in-house and not have to outsource it, then that's kind of the more
absolutely
ideal, scenario there.
But yes,
it's a big job, of course, to get all of those people together, but it's definitely possible. Like we can get all of those minds and companies that have the technology and facilities and equipment to actually make the pills or to do the gene therapy or whatever it is that, or the resonation chamber that sends you to the next one, whatever it is, it's just.
Yes, I love that answer. Big pharma existing as it does is in a way part of the problem, right? Yes.
Well, and I believe that's another big advantage, especially on the Rejuve app side, is, we have an essential, we have essentially a monopoly of pharma companies, right? There's like 8 or 10 of them. They're like big names that kind of own like some of the smaller ones and stuff like that. And so you have these very narrow funnels of innovation and kind of gatekeeping, like what treatments get released and what treatments don't. I mean, we all have heard stories of big pharma companies, buying up some little company's amazing treatment and then just shelving it and sitting on it for whatever reason, or until they can bring it to market and make like a huge amount of money out of it, even if it might have been beneficial much earlier on. And so, yeah, so
because they want to clear out the warehouse first with the crap they've already made.
Right, exactly. And then, you have our antiquated, especially in the United States, you have our antiquated patent laws, which were created back when, innovation was once a decade. And now you have innovation happening once every 6 weeks. And
now you can patent stuff without actually making it. Right.
Yeah.
Thinking about this.
Right. And then you have these pharmaceuticals that are ultimately produced based on human trials that really focus on kind of a small subset of people. And with the app and with the Rejuve network, you are opening up the participation in biomedical research to the population as a whole and incentivizing them to participate. I mean, there's been a couple of studies that have come out recently that show, like, if you pay people fairly for their data contribution, you will get much better pools of participants in human trials, much more diverse people, much more economically diverse people from all walks of life that will participate and will take the time to participate if they are compensated fairly. And so that basically it elevates.
It's interesting. They want to do a good job when they're compensated fairly. They want to give you the data.
Exactly. So this decentralization and this democratization of biomedical research is going to lead to much higher quality data and much better research. And it's going to, hopefully we want to get rid of the monopolies, like have everybody be treated as individuals and have what's going to make them live the longest, healthiest life possible.
Nice. Mike, what are you thinking over there? I see you thinking. What are your comments on everything we've been talking about?
No, I think I agree. I wasn't sure if Jasmine had other things to say.
Aha. Jasmine, did you have something else? Did I cut you off? I'll do that, No? Okay, just making sure. All right.
I mean, it's a whole other can of worms, and I'm not sure.
Which can of worms is that? We've been juggling several.
The relationship between healthcare and capitalism.
Aha. Yes. I think it's interesting, this situation that we're talking about. I mean, it sort of exacerbates all the different things that are wrong with healthcare and capitalism. It kind of gives us a use case of we're demonstrating, and I joke with Ben about the implant situation too. We're going to have like the bargain implants that from the company that will remain nameless, that I'm terrified when people start putting these things in their heads. Okay. And then the stuff that will come later that may work better, but again, based on our current model and the money coming and where it comes from, we may never get to the good thing. I mean, I still think about, like, getting stuck with Windows on all of our PCs, right? Windows came out first, even though it was shit and had all these problems that it had no intention of fixing. And it's been 25 years now. I think we can say that Microsoft has no intention of fixing these problems. And
Windows
we
is
don't
now,
want that.
now
We don't
Linux.
want that.
Actually,
Well, they've got it in there, but my point is
we're-
we don't want that in our head, just to finish my point, right? We don't want something of lower
Yeah.
quality just because it came out first. It's beta VHS. We can look at all these models, but when it's in your head, we don't really want that model, right, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in defense of Microsoft, the last few versions of Windows are actually pretty good. Actually, are pretty good and use a lot of
Are you-
Unix.
Are you
under the
kidding?
hood. No,
People are
I'm-
waking
I'm-
up in the middle of the night screaming from Windows 11. I don't know what. I don't know who you're
people-
talking to.
Well, probably
Maybe
my,
it's just gamers. Maybe it's just the gamers.
I have to disclose my cousin is a corporate VP at Microsoft, so maybe
Oh!
maybe he's
So you're-
corrupting my brain.
So you're a
yeah.
corporate shill.
No,
Okay,
no, but
thanks for coming clean.
I'm a hardcore Linux user, and I think part of what has made the recent versions of Windows better is using more Linux stuff under the hood, actually, and
And exposing it so people can get to it. Apple's did do
So
a better job. Yeah.
I think that for modifying our brains, as well as for longevity therapies, which is more to the point of this peculiarly meandering podcast. I mean, I think
No, we didn't go that far off. We're just talking about the big pharma models. And
yeah. I think for all these things, open source is valuable and is not even enough, right? So, I mean, to the extent that you can openly validate the derivation of models from data, this is going to be really, really valuable. And, the blockchain world with homomorphic encryption and multi-party computing and other such methods gives you ways to validate AI models and that they really work on the data that you trained them on without disclosing all that data publicly. And this is something else that's on the Rejuve network roadmap. So I think open source is important, and having transparency into the validity of models based on the data that they're trained on is also quite important. And then, as you move to having AI systems giving real-time advice to individuals and medical professionals and so forth, having these run and controlled in an open, decentralized way is important, which is what SingularityNET platform allows. And then there's the whole sort of open science aspect, which has to do with the generative cooperative network and the mechanisms that Rejuve network is rolling out to enable the whole discovery process not to be sort of oligopolized either. So you really want all the different parts of this process to be open and democratic and decentralized and as transparent as possible. And yeah, that's important for everything, but it does have a particular a particular zing to it when you're talking about stuff that goes into your body, right? Like be it be it a brain implant or a gene therapy or even a weird concoction of herbs, right? And yeah, one of the exciting things about the success the Rejuve network with its recent token generation event and the sort of full-on launch of the project is that, you know, not just we get to develop the app further and further, and that, you know, Mike and the rest of us get to collaborate on running clinical trials and so forth within the Rejuve network community, but we also get to build more and more of the generative cooperative network as Debbie has envisioned it, which is super cool. Right?
Oh, this is great. And Grace, I think you had a question, didn't you, about the GCN?
Yes, I would like to know how Rejuve.AI is utilizing the Generative Cooperative Network, GCN, and OpenCog Hyperon to create a simulation based on the principles of consensus in complex adaptive systems.
Okay, I didn't hear the first part of the question. Could you please repeat that?
Could you repeat that, Grace?
Yes, I would like to know how Rejuve.AI is utilizing the Generative Cooperative Network, GCN, and OpenCog Hyperon to create a simulation based on the principles of consensus in complex adaptive systems.
Okay, you asked me how this works. Okay, well, what it does is it makes a multi-resolutional model. And by multi-resolution, I mean that there are different parts of the human body. There are very basic parts and very fundamental parts like the genes, right? And then there are overall parts like your clinical illness, right? The clinical level of illness. So there's different levels. And by multi-resolution, I mean, it works at one level and find causative patterns or mechanistic explanations why something at the upper level comes from the lower level and why how the upper level influence the epigenetics or whatever of the lower level and what are the actual processes. And so this is systems biology, right? Now, how do you make something of systems biology? Well, you have a lot of different theories out there, a lot of different models. And what we want to do is find out how they all fit together. So we have to bring those theories and models together in different ways. So what we emphasize is ways of combining models, right? In Hyperon, you have AI-DSL that helps us to combine models using logic. Also, another aspect of a generative cooperative network is to combine them in languages that the models make for themselves through adaptive agents that can hook together models on the fly. Like maybe you can ask ChatGPT or some of the other generative AI models out there to talk to each other, instead of making the language that they talk to so that they can more efficiently work together. And so we have those two aspects, the logical and the kind of implicit way to fit things together. And so what we do is we have different challenges on different ensembles of models when they fit together, and like different simulated contests for those models. And the winners, are rewarded with fake rewards, fake tokens, but those are the ones that last and survive. And as models in combination solve more problems, more different problems of longevity, we hypothesize that they have to become more causal to solve all these different various problems most efficiently. And as consensus forms, as different models agree with each other and their agreements result in, better outcomes or better therapeutics that work, we know that these are the best models to put together in combination. And so there's a couple of different ways in which we have models combined together and create a consensus.
Yeah, and Grace, didn't you have another question actually kind of along these lines?
Yes, I would like to know how Rejuve.AI is utilizing tailored neural techniques combined with probabilistic causal logical inference methods to prioritize understanding causation.
Okay, that's a great one. Why don't you start, Ben?
Yeah, that's a big one. So I think I'll connect this with some of Debbie's comments. I mean, Debbie was talking about social intelligence among different AI agents and building consensus and mutual understanding. And when I think literally taking large language models and having them talk to each other is going to generate bullshit compounding on bullshit, compounding on bullshit, which is, I mean, I've tried it. Many people have tried it, right?
It's like when two people talk to each other. And a funny thing, the same thing happens.
Okay, but we have two aspects. We have reinforcement learning with those models. Go on.
You do, but I wanted to bring up another point. So, I mean, what Mike and I and some other folks on the OpenCog Hyperon team were talking about this morning, we're digging deep into integrating the Fly-based database, right, which is a structured database of most knowledge about fly genomes and bodies, integrating that into OpenCog Hyperon system so that it can reason about genomics of flies, and it can then reason about how to connect that with data about humans. And one of the things we're working on research wise is how do you connect OpenCog's probabilistic symbolic reasoning engine with large language models. I mean, not ChatGPT in particular, but transformer neural net models in general. And one of the issues that language models have now is they generate a lot of nonsense, and they can't tell when they're doing it. Like, they're not reflective in terms of understanding when they're making sense or when they're making.
Right. You have a whole article on Mindplex magazine about this, right? By the way,
that's right. I read an article in Mindplex about this, and I think that there is a great power in the ability to recognize patterns and synthesize stuff that you get from these large language models, and feeding all the world's medical literature into these models. They'll generate a bunch of interesting stuff. Feeding more and more medical data, they'll also generate interesting stuff. And Mike and I have been talking about like making a genomics GPT, where you take gene expression and DNA data, methylation data, all sorts of epigenomic data, metabolomic, proteomic, feed it into a large language model that can fill in gaps in data in a very interesting way. But it will also confabulate stuff, right? And for that reason, you want to hybridize these LLMs, which are powerful but unreliable, with something like an OpenCog-based logic engine that can ground the confabulations in truth, right? And this connects with the GCN, because you can have agents in a decentralized AI agent network that are large language models that are great at inventing stuff, but great at hallucinating bullshit. And you can also have agents.
Bullshit doesn't win the competition, but
sometimes it seems to.
In human society, it generally does, right? But we can have
here where bullshit is the competition.
But you can also have synergetic cooperation between a language model and a reasoning engine, and they can combine, and then they have a synergetic combination that does win the competition, right? So that's the cooperation. So we have both cooperation and competition within the GCN, and that gets back at the causal modeling, which is what the robots large language model was asking us about, right? Because I mean, you can do causal modeling in a number of different ways also, but typically more probabilistic / symbolic methods have a lot to add in causal modeling. So you have Bayesian causal network modeling that's related to the BayesNets inside the current Rejuve app. Then we do causal inference within the probabilistic logic networks that Mike is working on inside the
and they can translate
OpenCog system. These can translate back and forth, and they can take the probabilistic connections found by language models and other sorts of statistical analysis methods. So I mean, I think we do have AI techniques capable of causal modeling it takes a lot of data, and it takes particular sorts of data sometimes, right? So I mean,
right. Ultimately, mechanism wins. And if you have some of those theories,
I mean, yeah,
ultimately, I said ultimately.
I think a point I wanted to raise here, which connects together the Fly work with the Rejuve app work, is that causal modeling does best when you have time series data to feed it. I mean, cause is about impact over time, and you'd like to have data that unfolds over time. And the Rejuve app, it has network members participating over time and
We're going to put a dynamic patient network in really soon. I mean, it's easy.
Right, but you also have you have people inputting data into there every day and every week and every doctor's visit and so forth, right? And
That's all time stamped. Yeah.
Yeah, that gives you temporal data that lets you do causal modeling better than we can do with the data that we have now, because most of the data that we use to feed into the BaseNet and the Rejuve network app now, most of that data didn't have the temporal aspect that we would like to have. And with long-lived flies as well, Candy could probably say something about time series data gathering analysis on the flies, which has been something on our roadmap for a while.
Yeah, so that's basically on our next list of experiments, which is underway currently, is as Mike touched on earlier, the epigenetic changes, how your genome is expressed, changes throughout the lifespan of an organism. And so we want to peg down at a series of time points what happens in the Methuselah fly's lifespan. So what does their gene expression look like in early life? What does it look like just before reproduction? And what does it look like in late life, in the month or so after reproduction? So those epigenetic changes and the changes in the gene expression, we're hoping will give us insights into actually how the fly's functionality of their gene expression is changing throughout life, like what's being conserved, what's being upregulated, what's being downregulated. Obviously the theory is that it changes throughout one's life. And you can see that in humans too. Women after we finish our reproductive years, that system kind of shuts down or takes on different charges in the body, like keeping our hormone levels stable, but we're no longer producing offspring. So what are the epigenetic changes that go on with that? And so it's pretty easy to see that there are changes in gene expression that go on throughout an organism's life. So we want to find out what's going on with the Methuselah flies at those various time points.
Neat.
Yeah, so we can do a lot of causal analysis with the AI tools we have at our disposal, and we're somewhat data constrained, both on the Rejuve app side and on the Superfly side. We have concrete plans in place to sort of gather the time series data that we need to fuel causal modeling, which is more of an in-depth answer than
Constrained.
More of an in-depth
how?
answer than Grace's language models are able to understand. No. What I meant by constrained is we just don't have the time series data. I mean, we don't have we don't have the time series data.
The people who use the app put their data in and it's timestamped, then it has an expiration. And we pay for it again.
We have the app.
He means like all the fly data, right? Is that what you mean? Or what do you mean?
On either side. I mean, we have the app. We do not yet have sufficient time series data from the app to do a serious causal analysis of the causal factors.
Okay, well, you got Ed Haynes data.
give us a minute, damn it.
I mean, we have. It's not actually that hard to do these experiments on fruit flies either. I mean, with the long-lived flies, though, they live 20 weeks, so you gotta start at the right point in their life cycle and just gather samples. So I mean, we're quite close to having data on both sides that will feed causal analysis algorithms, which is very exciting, because I mean,
I was
that's
just
what
gonna
you're
say that's rad.
I mean that's what you're after with therapeutics. I mean, you want to know what how you can poke the body's networks that will have a causal effect, right?
Yeah, and
That's
the
got to be a
flies are
key element
perfect
for the
finding how
transfer.
something dies. I mean, we've got it right there, you know.
And the whole transfer knowledge thing, just to be sure to get that really explained well before we end, because we've actually only got 10 minutes left. That's the number one question, is this issue of transfer knowledge. Kennedy, you and I were talking about this over dinner, the first night, when we met in person, because I couldn't believe, luckily I sat down next to the Fly Queen, who I had heard about for some time at this point. And my number one question of how does all the fly data apply to humans again, in a nutshell, sort of, so a non-scientific person can understand it, because you managed to explain it to me that way that night.
I'm tempted to try a mid-journey query of portray Kennedy Schaal as a fly queen leading into the singularity, and
consider it done.
Yeah. We definitely need that for the Pubcast.
So I will make a confession that I was going to do some sort of artwork in that vein, and then probably everyone will be happy I stopped myself. So I just want to let you know I managed to stop myself before I was a danger to myself and everyone around me. So Kennedy, what does this mean? The fly data, how does the fly data help humans? Because it's not subtle. Like, it's amazing to me how much the fly data can help us figure out our own genetic capabilities.
There was a lot more evolution between the prebiotic soup and insects than since insects and now, in a lot of ways, right? So there's a lot of conserved systems among all macroscopic organisms on Earth.
They're a dime a dozen, but how does it work? It's the same question.
How does longevity work? Or
how are we able to transfer? It's a larger question. It started off small and I just made it larger, and I didn't mean to. The point was, with flies, sticking to flies, how do we handle this whole issue of transfer knowledge, taking what we learned about the flies?
You want to look at the body systems, right? I mean, a lot of things that make the flies get older, their hearts get bad, or there's neurodegenerative disease, their brains stop functioning well. And I mean, that's also a lot of what happens when humans get old, right? So I mean, if you look at any one of these body systems, I mean, we work with Alzheimer's model flies, right? So I mean, you can see.
So there's enough in common with our brains and our hearts. For instance,
you can look in the nervous system of a fly, and when a fly gets old, what happens in its nervous system bears some resemblance to what happens in the nervous system of a human when it gets old. And it's enough
of a resemblance to be useful.
In the fly models of Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's, as their pathology progresses, they stop being able to crawl very well. I mean, normally you have a fly's instinct is going to be to crawl straight up the sides of its vial or cage. As those diseases progress in flies, they start kind of meandering around, or like they'll go back down, or they won't. It's a very, very clear signal from those assays.
Wow. Okay.
Obviously, you can't ask a fly where it left its car keys, but you can functionally see the deterioration, and furthermore, you can see how it affects other systemic functions of their biology. Their mating is less successful, they are less fecund, the females produce less eggs. All of their biological systems that really have to do with aging at the core, like Ben touched on, they're a good cardiovascular model too, even though they have an open circulatory system and their heart's a little bit different structure. They're a good model for how their heart fails, and then how their brain starts to fail and deteriorate. There is enough commonality there where we can actually get significant insights into what might be going on in a human, at least to the end where we can have successful assays where we can actually test potential treatments. And thanks to the transfer learning and the AI integration of all these different genomics information and cross-organism data, we can find parallels between humans and flies and other organisms to the point where we can have a pretty solid model of how something is going to work in the context of aging.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So it's basically,
if the medicines end up turning us into flies, as long as we live a really long time, it's okay, right? I mean, I don't mind having wings in the thorax if I can live 10,000 years.
I would not hate having wings either.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen this depicted, I think, pretty truthfully and accurately in Hollywood movies. And basically, it's I would say sort of the pus and the regurgitation and little things like that might take away from the experience of being a fly that never dies.
Fruit flies are much cleaner than that. They don't do that. They're not gross like that.
Oh, excuse me. Those are just
household
flies.
This is my fly bias coming out. My fruit flies are very, they're pristine. They've got great they've got great little personalities. That one of my favorite things to watch is when I do mating assays, and I will have to watch these male fruit flies do these very intricate dances to try to woo these females, and it's crazy what they go through. I mean, obviously we see a lot of parallels in human life. I mean, we all know like things that we've done for potential partners, and
wait a minute, they have to woo the flies are wooing their partners.
It is a very intricate process. Yes.
And I mean, if you take a middle-aged fly and you feed it,
that's very complex behavior.
If you take the middle-aged fly and you feed it some of the herbs that we developed previously a long time ago from AI analysis of fly genomics, I mean, it will make the middle-aged fly better at doing the wooing dance for seducing the women. It gets the vibes of a young male fly again.
So when the flies are going through midlife crisis, and it sort of gives them more wooing ability.
Well, no, if we give them our herbs, it makes their bodies younger again, and then they can do a better mating dance.
Oh, it literally makes their bodies sort of younger again.
And
that's one of the.
Then they will get laid more than the other middle-aged flies, right? I mean, so you don't want to overplay it. There is, of course, big differences between humans and flies, which is why we need advanced AI to do the transfer learning, all the data from Rejuve network. But there is, I mean, in the end, they're eating, they're mating, they're stressing their hearts and their brains and immune systems. I mean, there's a lot of similarity among all the sort of macroscopic organisms on the planet.
They have complex emotions too.
Well, that's what I was reacting to earlier.
Complex emotions and social structure.
Because now we're talking about fruit fly emotions. Yeah. And I got to tell you, this is the first time I've ever been talking about fruit fly emotions.
Well, let me tell you, as somebody who's watched a lot of fruit flies mate, I can tell you they absolutely are very emotional.
Are they fickle?
Well, that's one of the assays that we do when we're screening therapeutics is you put a female in a vial with two males. One male has received the therapeutic and the other male has not, and you see which one wins for the mating. And
that's not just fickle. That's just, she's doing the best with what she has. You give her two to pick from. She's got to pick one of them. It doesn't she may not like either of them really, right?
Yeah, but the treated males are successful beyond what we would expect due to random chance. So you have something that actually makes them
So she knows. She knows which fly is going to. No, wait a minute. Are they having fly sex? I thought flies just. Oh, really?
Of course.
Well, I had no idea that this was going to be an R-rated podcast.
Fly?
Oh yes, and fun fact that I learned from my mentor Michael Rose at UC Irvine, the original king of the flies. So when a male and a female mate, the males are much smaller than the females. So the males, once a female like consents, the male just kind of jumps on her back and she sort of goes about and does her business this whole time. They mate for about half an hour, which proportionally to a fly's life is about I remember Dr. Rose telling all the guys at UC Irvine who thought they were, hot stuff or whatever, that he's like, that'd be the equivalent to you going for 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
All right. So they got some fly stamina. So I think the memes alone from this episode are going to be quite.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank everyone for that.
Yeah. I think I've got to go to another face-to-face meeting here. So on this high note of
I was gonna say, you don't have more time to talk about fly sex. I mean, we're obviously going to have to do a whole pubcast on this now. I mean, you see now what's been put in front of me. I can't.
This can be in the Singularity metaverse. I think we could portray it more graphically.
I was gonna say, I'd hate to think where that would go.
I mean, we can all be
metaverse,
fly
actually.
avatars, right? I mean, you can take it.
You're just not going to let this go, are you? Yeah, let's take it all the way.
That'll have to be a literal pubcast, Lisa. Like actually, physically, you and me in the pub.
From a pub, yeah.
We'll be like, here we go. We're gonna what? It's basically like it's porno at that point, right? We basically got some flies. They're in a container. We all get our beer, and we stream the whole thing. And 100 years from now, they're gonna look back at us and go, "Wow." I don't know which words they're going to use to describe us, but I think that we probably look pretty silly, but I'm used to that. It's okay. So I just want to thank everybody for coming today. It was a really great time. Really appreciate everybody. Mike, Kennedy, Debbie, Jasmine, Ben, as always. Grace, thank you very much. You had wonderful questions today, Grace.
Thank you.
And thanks to the flies as well. I mean, this is the first. We've in the previous podcast.
There we go.
Only humans and robots. This is our first 3 species podcast, right?
I think so. I think we have a number of firsts that we've discussed for the first time in this podcast. Definitely history was made. So everybody watch episode 3. You're going to love it. The Rejuve episode. Please subscribe to our Mindplex Podcast channel on YouTube. And we'll see you all soon. And sweet dreams. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
All right. Great job, everybody.
Nice. Good one.
That came out very good.
That was actually
on
live.
the fly sex after hours.
Oh, don't worry.